Hello, Anne. Thank you so much for joining the show. I'm so excited to have you on the show and just to hear your story. So thank you so much for joining.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wore my Under Armour soccer shirt in honor of us soccer girls.
I love it. I love it. Yes, and we'll get into that. So we definitely have that soccer connection, which I love. So, Anne, you are the Senior Vice President of Engineering at Under Armour. But even prior to Under Armour, you've held executive roles at People Admin, a talent management software for education in the education space, and then also you worked at IBM for 20 plus years. So we'll get into that, but you've held a range of roles at IBM. So I love to start off with take me back to when you were my age, 22 years old, but I listened to a podcast with you prior and I want to hear about your college experience. So take me back to when you were college. What was going on in your mind? Did you know what you wanted to do, what you wanted to be, and how were you navigating this time?
Oh gosh, I mean, simple answer, absolutely not. I didn't have a freaking clue. I knew going into college that I love math. I finished high school in 1992, so you're seeing the first time computer science classes are being offered in high school, and I was really good at the math and the computer science, and I knew I wanted to do something along those lines, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I'd always been in high school that straight A student. I played sports year round. I was National Honor Society. I did every activity. And I got to college and I suddenly had this oh my gosh, I'm on this, I felt like my life was predestined for me. And I kind of just stepped back and said, I don't know what I want to do. And I tried all sorts of different classes outside my major and eventually did come back to computer science. But yeah, it was, college for me is where it hit, all that uncertainty of, everything that had been certain to me up until that point. And it took me a while to come to terms with it was okay that I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. And it took me, probably until my mid to late 20s to really say this is the direction I want to take. This is what I can do with this. And, I'm grateful IBM gave me lots of opportunities to kind of weave my path, weave a pathway early in my career to figure some things out that I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. But yeah, I think my biggest thing for anyone who's, if you're in college, if you're just out of college, it's okay to not know what the heck you're going to do. I mean, it really is okay.
Yeah. So did you have mentors kind of helping you through this time? Or was it just kind of I'll take this class, I'll see if I like it? It was just internal dialogue.
So in college, I think one of the things I came to understand later was I wish I'd done a better job seeking out mentors in college. In college, I was very, I think I was just kind of bullheaded and I'm going to figure this out myself. I can totally figure this out myself. And I really internalized a lot of it. And it wasn't until I got into the workforce and I had some really great managers and those developed into mentors over the years who would say, sit me back and say oh, wait, Anne, look, I can tell you honestly, you're good at this. We see you you're good at this and you enjoy this. And we can tell you're miserable when you're doing this other thing. And, it was those mentors that kind of early coaching along the way that just kind of, tweaked me those little things. Yeah. And then, one job leads to you do a good job working with someone in one job and they kind of drag you to your next job and they pull you to your next job. And at least for me, it became I feel like the best and most exciting parts of what I was doing is where I ended up in the next step. And then, I went back for my master's degree, actually, and I worked full-time while I was getting my master's degree. And it was kind of in that moment that I was able to really, I think if I really look back and say, this is what I want to do, this is the path I want to be on. And I at that point, I was 28, 29 years old, 30 years old at that point. So again, even to this day in my mid-40s, it's I feel like a teenager trapped in a 45-year-old body a lot of the time.
Yeah. Yeah. So you went to IBM, you were starting to find your way. So at the moment, take me when you were late 20s, when you were okay, this is what I want to be. What were key indicators that we were okay, I'm on the right track now? And kind of almost measuring personal growth. What did you use to measure your personal growth?
Yeah, so one of the things, and I'd always struggled to find the words with it, but one of the guys that works for me actually sent me this blog post called Being Glue. as in like, sticking things together glue. And I came to realize like the folks that I admired most were the ones who could draw on all of the different things going on and kind of see what was happening between the cracks or get the right introductions made. And, it takes me, it's something that I was ashamed to admit younger in my career, but now I can admit, it's like, yeah, I'm a computer scientist, but I'm never going to be the best coder in the room. I was never going to be like the fastest one cranking out code. Like, I was miserable those days. I had to be in front of the computer cranking code till 3 and 4 in the morning. Right. But what I drew this incredible energy from was like, okay, wait, here's our strategy over here. And I just talked to someone in marketing and they don't understand the work that goes into the engineering. But if I can explain to them, like, look, we have these other paths and like that kind of, bringing the different disciplines together. And it's something, again, this post being glue was so fantastic in calling out. It's like when you're more senior, that is what senior people do is they're glue, but it's hard to realize that. And it's, it's not always recognized as such a critical skill too, for folks earlier in their career. But I think that was what it was for me, is just that being glue moment. That's what I wanted to do, is I wanted to be kind of glue that brought things together.
Yeah. I almost view that as like looking at today's roles. I feel like that's similar to like a product management role. Would you agree? Yeah. Like you kind of piece it, like you're talking to engineering, you're talking to design, marketing, and just kind of making it all glue together. I think that's cool.
Yeah.
So you worked at IBM for around 20 years. And like I talked to you in our prep and I was saying it's not common to work at these companies for a long time. Like even back then it's a little more common, but nowadays especially. So tell me about this process. What made you stay at IBM and not kind of leave and maybe, experience other industries, other roles or whatnot? So how did you decide that?
Yeah. And I mean, what's even more strange and unusual is my dad spent 43 years at IBM after he got out of the Navy. So my dad was in the Navy during Vietnam, went straight to IBM when he came out of Vietnam and spent his entire career, 43 years, retired in 2011 at IBM. And that's just, again, that's unheard of today. I mean, when I first started out at IBM, there were still pensions, right? Like if you last, there's pensions. That's unless you're in a government job, those don't really exist much anymore. Yeah. But for me, what it was is, IBM is a huge, huge, huge company, and I just looked at it as, rather than IBM being one huge company, let's look at it as a bunch of small companies. So you have the business unit called software group, but even in there, you've got every different software product IBM makes. You've got services, and then all different types of services and solutions. And then you could start looking at it instead of by technology, by like, retail sector, banking sector. And so I just try to to me, it was this look for something really interesting to move into. And what I was fortunate enough to have is that every step along the way, there was always someone who, helped me, coach me, mentor me, and usually pulled me into that next job that was kind of built me all those experiences. So what you did see at IBM is a lot of folks there either spend their whole career getting really deep on one subject, and those folks are like the brilliant genius experts that, you love to learn from. But I actually took the path of, I joked that I was, 2 inches deep, but 2 miles wide kind of thing, right? As I surveyed so many different things. And so to me, 20 years flew by like nothing. I mean, again, it goes back to looking at myself in the mirror going, oh my God, what happened here? Yeah. And yeah.
So when you were getting these new opportunities at these different roles, I'm wondering, were you drawn more towards the leader and being like, I want to learn from that person and I could potentially be that person, be that leader? Or was it more like the role and the skills you would learn in that sense? Kind of how was the balance?
It's both. So I'd say early in my career it was the intellectual curiosity. I wanted to just learn something. I'm really driven by what can I read today? What can I learn today? I have a hard time just sitting in Netflix, just watching Netflix, because I'm like, okay, it must be educational. And by Netflix, I mean just I don't mean the educational part of that. I mean the just idiot box part of it, right? Which yeah. I know we all need it, but I struggle with that. 'Cause I need to learn something today, even if it's a great reading something by a great science fiction writer. Not just the news or another discipline. And so early on, I mean, the drive was knowledge. And then, at the end of the day, I'm still kind of an introvert. I'm a computer scientist. I'm a nerd. I'm a jock, but I'm a nerd. And I have that very introverted side. So where I pivoted in the leadership, I think really was after my master's degree, is I looked at those really good leaders and said, okay, how do they communicate? How do they interact with people? How do they, what are the characteristics that make me want to follow them, right? So the concept of followership, like who's the people I'd like follow into the burning building, and what can I learn from those characteristics that they have? And so I think that's what a pivoted is like. I took the subject matter expertise upon myself to go learn, and more went to seeking out mentors to say, how do they act? Like, how do they lead businesses, right? How do they inspire those around them? And sadly, one of the awful truths for everyone in their careers, sometimes you learn, okay, I don't want to do that now as well.
Yeah, definitely. So 20 years are almost like you're reaching the tail end of IBM. And so both, what was the thought process in being like, okay, now is my time to leave. It's my time to switch companies. And also take me through the transition between being in a non-management role and now really reaching these like senior roles at people admin, and then eventually we'll get to Under Armour. But yeah, take me through that transition.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I will say, like, so I went from non-manager to manager as I finished my master's degree. So again, late 20s, and then moving into the executive ring. So it's kind of like two different clips. So I always jokingly say, and it's one of those joke, not a joke kind of things, is once you switch into management, you see another side of people that you didn't see. So when you're partnering with folks on a project, you see the work side of them, or maybe you see the happy hour side of them or something like that. But when you're a manager, like you learn and have to deal with some really deep personnel problems sometimes. And, some of them are just your heart breaks for folks. And sometimes it's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this like it's the things you don't think actually happen. And so you see this, there's the first kind of like aha, or like, pardon my language, the oh shit moments of like what the reality of this is. But then there's the pivot to kind of executivehood, where I would say it's okay, everything you have done as a technologist, now you've got it, you're forced to be glue, you're forced to tie it together, you're put in a position where it's like, no, people are looking to you for the answers, as opposed and even as a manager, there's some of that, but it's really like you become the man, right? I see this, and I've seen this at IBM, I've seen this at People Admin, I've seen this at Under Armour. It's like, no, it's your job to provide the answers, and there is no one to pass the buck to. And I think that's a pretty important transition too. And that's one, just it's owning it and going through that. So I think there's that part of that. There's that part of the transition, and then the second part of your question was like going from IBM to People Admin, that transition. So, wow, that was it's funny. I struggled to articulate why I did it. IBM was fantastic to me. I cannot again, it was amazing. Some of my dearest friends to this day are there. I can't say a bad word. And there was just something that was like, okay, it was that 20, I think it was just a mental thing for me. It was the 20-year. And if I kind of had this thought of like, if I don't make a jump now, I'm going to be my dad retiring here in 43 years. And that wasn't a good or a bad statement. There's no value statement. And, as happens, you start getting more recruiting calls the more senior you get. And I think I finally just said, okay, let me talk to one of these recruiters now. And one of the things that drew me to People Admin in particular was I'd spent 20 years as a pure technologist on that side of the house, like really just driving, going into the weeds of things that are so critical, like the things we don't even know about inside our computer, but like knowing that detail. And to go to People Admin, whose mission it was to service schools, to make sure teachers stay in classrooms, like substitute teacher management systems, personnel systems, things like that. It's like I felt like I had a mission and a value going over there. And I think that's what finally made me pull the ripcord and say, like, all right, I've learned so much as a technologist. How do I take that and provide, give back in a way? Like if I need to still have a job. I'm not independently wealthy enough that I don't need to have a job. So why not have this amazing job where I can give something back to, students and teachers?
Yeah. Okay. I can go with this in so many directions.
Oh, no. Let's go.
So when you made that decision, was that how did you feel in your gut? Like, did you think, okay, this is the right decision? When did you realize it's the right or wrong decision and you maybe should have stayed at IBM potentially?
I mean, I was terrified. I mean, there's no two ways about it. Leaving something for 20 years, like, it was hard. I mean, like I said, what I loved about IBM is it was a family. I mean, my team was family, and it feels like you're telling your family, I'm going to move to the North Pole and never see you again, or we can only talk on the phone, right? So that was hard. And I knew it was, I'll say it this way. I knew it was the right decision when I got to people admin and I saw how much I had yet to learn. So I knew I could operate within what makes IBM a company, even though every business unit was separate. It was being thrust into a completely different mode of operating, right? It's a smaller company, a company that's owned by a private equity firm as opposed to a large publicly traded corporation. And I walked in, and on day 2, I realized I know nothing is what it felt like.
Yeah.
And there's part of me that said, oh my God, this is the biggest mistake. But part of me is like, no, this is why you did it. And I really tried to, you go through I went through all the imposter syndrome things, but I was like, no, just buckle down and learn it. And you're going to make mistakes and you're going to screw up, and just power through it. And as long as you learn from every mistake you make, I just kept telling myself that. So,
wow. So thinking of your experience, what advice would you give people who are similar to you, like in this great environment, like very like comfortable maybe because you're just so close with the people, it's a family, but at the same time you think, okay, I need to take this leap, and like worst case you fail, but at the end of the day you're learning.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's a good question. My main advice I think I'd start with is it's such a personal choice, really. Like, there are things that folks, you never know, maybe you've got young children at home, or you've got a family member who's ill, and just, you might feel like you want to make that leap, but you need the security. And I think the first thing I'd say is, like, you might have this tug, but it's okay not to move too, right? It's okay to stay in something secure and find other ways to push yourself into discomfort and push yourself into personal growth. But I think if you have that inkling and you feel like you have the security, like, was it Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Like, if you've got the other needs satisfied, that you can take that risk and take that jump. It's the best thing I know I could have done for myself. And like I said, I could go back and write you probably a 20-page document as to all the things I wish I could do differently at people admin. But at the same time, I know I can write that list saying I learned something from each of those, and I learned something. And hopefully it's made me better for Under Armour. And, if there's other jobs in the future, hopefully all this just, makes me better and, allows me to give back, not just to whatever job I'm in, but to the technical community too.
Yeah. I love it. I love that answer. So before we get to Under Armour, any advice also from that transition from a non-management to management role? Thinking of your experience, how can you really, because you mentioned it's different being the non-manager and then really thinking, okay, I have to think for other people. I have to deal with other people's issues, things that you never really imagined could happen to people. Like, how do you really prepare for that?
One of the best bits of advice I got, though, I was really struggling, and I've told this story in a couple forums, but when I first got promoted into management, okay, so you see this wild head of curly hair I have, right? It was longer when I was younger, but I actually chopped it off and started straightening it, because in my mind, I said, to go into management, I've got to look a certain way, and there's a mold I need to adhere to. And I actually had someone, and this kind of happened around, someone said, I think I was maybe 2 years in, said, Anne, you got to where you are because of who you are, not despite who you are.
Wow.
And it was just a very simple but profound statement, right? And I kind of keep going back to that, because I've had these moments in my career where, again, the little imposter starts to speak up, and you're like, oh, I've got to conform. And it's like, no, I was hired because of this, right? I was hired not just because of the resume, but because of the interviews I've done, because of the interactions I have. And, you've got to, to me, I let that little imposter drive me to learn and be better. And I try not to have it tip me over into, like complete, like, curl up in a ball going, I can't do this. Yeah. So it's that balance. But it's, you get to where you are because of who you are. And so just remember, don't change that, as whether it's that first step into management, whether it's that first executive position, when you're changing jobs, whatever.
Amazing. Even like you can think of that. That's a lesson that can be applied to so many things. Like even coming to Stanford, like imposter syndrome is a big aspect, and you feel like you don't belong when you're seeing all these incredible people. So I think that's a really, really important lesson. I love it. So now going into Under Armour, so from my understanding, they didn't even have a engineering department, or at least like you were the first one to really bring this engineering sector into digitizing it and not just being a clothing brand and whatnot. So tell me about this decision to come to this new space, and how your experience is.
Yeah, and I mean this goes back to I made the comment earlier. I'm a nerd and I'm a jock, and I feel like this is the perfect connection of both worlds. I actually told a mentor of mine back in 2013. He asked me like, "What's your dream job?" And he worked for IBM, and I was chief of staff for him on his assignment at the time. And he's like, "What's your dream job?" And I was like, and he said, "Not IBM. So what would you really like? What's your dream job?" And I said, "I'd love to head up an engineering or technology organization at a company that cares about like health, fitness, nutrition, wellness, like that's." And he actually just paused and looked at me. He goes, "Yeah, that's you. That makes sense." And so like coming to this job, like when I got the call, and it was, I feel so grateful. Again, connections to me too are not just about folks that you can look up to, but like, it was actually a friend of mine I'd worked with years ago at Under Armour. We'd stayed in connection through, like, we became friends, and or through at IBM, I think. Sorry, I said Under Armour, I think.
Yeah.
But we stayed in connection because like we both enjoyed a lot of the same fitness activities and mutual friends. And he called me up about this position, said, "Hey, there's a job available. You'd be my boss, but like, are you interested?" I was like, "Wait, you'd be okay with me being your boss? That's kind of cool." And but it was really fascinating because Under Armour as a company had acquired MyFitnessPal, MapMyFitness, and Endomondo, 3 apps, plus looking to evolve the e-commerce business. And obviously in the retail space, everyone wants to personalize and get real, like, great loyalty programs that engage you. And obviously in COVID, more than ever now, you realize it's that digital experience that's going to draw folks back in. And it turned out, Under Armour had been running them as kind of separate groups. And this was the opportunity, like let's start from the foundations up of engineering, like all the stuff that's being built, and let's unify it. So to me, it was a very interesting problem that brought together like all my years of IBM experience with like building enterprise class software, right? Building enterprise class systems. And then the people admin component, which was like small, nimble, about just outside of, PE funded. So just past startup phase, and like all of the fun things that come with that. And, mixing the cultures, trying to figure out how you take, like, really turning it into that, breaking down the problems of like, oh, wait, why are we doing this 3 different ways for 3 different apps when if we just did it one way, like everything's going to run better. And so it was, back to the glue comment, it's like I got to pull apart some really interesting engineering problems about how we did things, but also tying it to this amazing, thinking about Under Armour's strategy and digital direction around like, how do we really engage someone who is using Map My Run with, and then we've got our connected shoe, right? They're having this incredible experience. And then how do you say, well, they should know that we also make, great running leggings, or we have for women a great new Infinity sports bra. Like, how do you bring all that cool stuff together and do it from the perspective of technology rather than a physical retail store? So to me, that was just like, it's so much fun.
So cool. I love it. And it's combining like 2 of your core passions, which is like so exciting.
Oh yeah.
So another reason, so She Leads is all about being a female leader and kind of the empowerment of that. So I want to know your experience, because female leaders, there's also not many in these engineering roles, these senior VP of engineering roles as well. And so tell me about your experience. Have you ever felt that you've had to overcompensate and really like show, or almost like that imposter syndrome? And kind of how have you dealt with that, if so?
Yeah, I mean, this is a tough one to talk about because I genuinely believe all people are good. I genuinely, I think I don't think anyone sets out to go to work and say I'm going to go, or in their daily life say I'm going to screw over this person. I mean, I think there's exceptions to every rule, and I think we can all say that's very true. But it's definitely a fact that in the technology side of the house, it's not uncommon for me to be the only woman in the room. Not at all. And I mean, and to be honest, like obviously in light of everything else happening, the social justice issues happening right now, I mean, women of color are even further underrepresented. And that's, it's a thing. It's really a thing. And, I'll just say I've struggled, and the way I've navigated that is to try to build personal relationships. So, and it might have been extra work sometimes, but if like I could sense tension, like I'd make sure there's a meeting before the meeting that I had to kind of make sure things were smoothed out. Do we understand each other? Are we on the same page? And I will say for the most part, I think things have changed, specifically even in the last 10 years of my career. The first 10 years I had some, definitely those experiences of like, and I joke to this day, I have my Rolodex of smart ass comments when someone like mansplains or he peats me, and I've got my Rolodex for when that happens, but I don't have to use it very often. And I think that at least for me, it's been the way I've kind of played that balance is just, again, it's about personal relationships. Cause again, I don't think anyone's trying to be bad or trying to do that. I think, a lot of times in work, you get caught up in the moment and the facts and the data that and the situation, the parts of the situation, and just, I don't know. I think personal connections make all the difference in the world, though.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's very valuable, just having these personal relationships. And even like everything we're going through right now, I think that's more important than ever to really like put effort into it and everything.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll finish off with these fun questions. So, Anne, I've loved this, by the way. I'm so excited to rewatch it and just learn from it. So thank you. So, okay, first question. What's a passion or hobby that you have that's just completely unrelated to your work?
Okay, so we've already covered soccer, but I'll kind of take that on a tangent. So I am not a badass Stanford soccer player like you were, or, your first episode, Julie Foudy there. Like I'm not even anywhere near that level, but I played since I was 6. I played D3 in college, and but what's been interesting is the last few years, or this last year in particular, I had a weird foot injury from doing this 5K, and I've actually picked up like Olympic style weightlifting again. So being a soccer player, I've always had the kind of soccer legs, and it turns out I'm actually pretty good at things like deadlifting and squatting. And so like kind of really putting some focus in that has been, it's been a very rewarding to have a goal towards something. Cause I think that's something, I do, when I can get back to soccer, obviously with COVID, there's not soccer happening unless you're a professional player right now. But having that outlet and having a goal of like, okay, I'm trying to up my PR. I'm trying to up my run max. I'm trying something new. Like, I'd never really done clean and press. And now I'm trying to learn how to do like a good clean and press. Cause I actually found out, in college in high school. And then 1 year in college, I did track mainly to stay in shape for soccer. But I also did shot, discus, and javelin, and found out like the motions with that, because those come from your legs. I'm actually pretty good at like military press and overhead press. And so to me, that's been a really fun thing to, explore as a way to, keep body movement going and so just,
cool. I love it. Yeah, that's very cool. I can agree with you with the soccer body and just definitely.
Yeah, we all need to buy it's like we need 2 different sizes of pants if we're talking. Yeah, I got it. We're there.
Definitely. So last question. What is a fun, weird, hidden talent? So no one really knows about, but it's a talent. So I'll go first. I was even going to forget to go, but here we go. I throw blueberries in my mouth. We'll see how this goes. All right. The blueberries are a little small today, but it's all right. Okay. There we go.
That is just amazing. It's like you didn't even flinch. Like I think I've tried that before and I've never hit one. So
I practiced for years. It's become just a regular, Yeah.
Yep. So it's funny, like if you get to know me, like there's always the weird facts about me. Like I always joke, I was trying to think about that, like talent, like from a talent standpoint, it's like, I'm just like, again, I really enjoy like fitness and exercise. I like learning and it's like all those things, but like, so some of the weird things, so I actually, in high school, played a lot of different musical instruments. I played the flute, the piccolo, the bassoon, the alto saxophone, and I actually was in the New York State All-State Band for bassoon even.
Oh my
So
goodness.
I was like uber nerd. I was the band nerd, and I was the jock, and I was like that. Gosh.
That's crazy.
I think,
Did you?
yeah, so that's a funny
and then
one.
In college, you played, shot put, javelin, soccer. So did you ever continue the music into college or no?
So I had to pick, honestly, when I got to college, I just didn't have enough time for training for soccer. And then at the risk of dating myself, a computer science degree, when I was there was no such thing as a laptop. So if you had work to do, you were in the lab. So I was either training or I was in the lab or I was sleeping. Yeah. So, so I had to lose one and I lost the musical instruments. I did try to learn to play the drums a few years ago though. So I can actually, I'm not good at it, but I can kind of keep a beat if you put me behind a drum kit. So
nice. I love, what's your favorite instrument?
I gotta admit, I like the beauty of the bassoon, to be honest. That was actually my favorite because it went like you could, like you were going like, I think it was like the octave range of it was just going from like the lowest to the low to the highest to the high. And
so cool.
To me, it was just such a beautiful melodic instrument. So I had a lot of fun with that.
I love it. Well, Anne, I really have to thank you so much for coming onto the show. It's been so much fun talking to you, just hearing your story and all the lessons that are interwoven in it. So thank you so much.
No, thanks for having me. This was so much fun.
Of course.